I'm Emily Johnson. I'm a historian, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the Columbian Exchange. This is the sharing of ideas, technologies, food, germs, all sorts of stuff between Europe and the Americas after Columbus stumbles upon the Americas, and all the different things that were exchanged between Europe and the Western Hemisphere. So many things. I'm going to focus a lot on food because I'm a food historian and that's what interests me. Things like guns, technology, germs, that's maybe a topic for another day. Columbus stumbles upon the Americas, doesn't know they're there, doesn't know what he's found, and he brings with him 2 ships full of really germy Europeans. Not to say that all Europeans were germy, but the fellows that Columbus brings with him are especially filled with germs because a lot of them were actually released from prison in return for signing up with him. So he's not really bringing the healthiest or the best behaved of European peoples along with him. And they've been crammed on 2 ships. Originally, it's 3 ships full of men. One of them sank, and they crammed onto 2 ships. And very limited water, probably didn't bathe the whole time they were crossing the Atlantic. And then when they get to the Caribbean, nobody's exactly sure which Caribbean island Columbus landed on first. I think every island in the Caribbean has a statue saying this is where Columbus landed first. His logbooks don't really match the geography of any place in the Caribbean. So lots of different historians have different theories, but somewhere in the Caribbean. And these men, as fast as they can get off the ships, of course they want to get off the ships, they want to get on land, and they bring all kinds of germs with them. They probably also, the ships brought rats, different types of rats than had previously been in the Caribbean. And as soon as those people are in contact with each other, they start sharing germs and food and languages and ideas and technology, and the exchange goes back and forth. It's not all one way. Don't think that the Europeans brought all the fancy technology and the Indians contributed all the food. That is definitely an oversimplification. So a lot of foods that we take for granted as universal today were not universal. Wheat came from Europe. Wheat was not grown in the Americas before contact with Europe. Pigs were unknown in the Americas. The Spanish brought those. There's a little bit of debate about whether there were any horses in the Americas before contact with the Europeans. I had been taught when I was an undergraduate and in graduate school that the Europeans brought horses, but it's not as clear and certain as people used to think it was. The foods from the Americas, obviously corn. Isn't this a lovely background? Corn comes from the Americas. It was completely unknown outside North and South America until Spanish bring it back to Europe. And think about how pervasive corn becomes around the world, like polenta. Can you imagine Italian food without polenta, or Spanish food with no corn? That's kind of hard to imagine too. I've had plenty of students insist that corn originally came from wherever they're from. I had a student from China who had been taught in China that corn originally came from China and then spread throughout the rest of the world. But corn comes from the Americas and spreads out from there, and it grows really well in other places. So it has become a huge crop. In a lot of places outside the Western Hemisphere, corn is primarily grown as animal food, not as people food, but it's still a very valuable crop in terms of dollars or euros or whatever in terms of money. Another food that is so important that we must mention it here that comes from the Americas is chocolate. Chocolate comes from the Americas. You may already know that it had a huge role in Mayan and Aztec culture. And you may have heard that cocoa beans were used as money by the Aztecs, but they did not eat chocolate, they drank it. And they often drank it, well, it was mixed with water, not with milk. All sorts of crazy seasonings mixed with it, including hot seasonings, chili peppers and things like that. Now, they did not have sugar in the Americas until after the Columbian Exchange. Sugar probably originated somewhere in Southeast Asia and spreads from there. Sugar needs really lots of humidity and a tropical climate to grow. Eventually, sugar is going to be grown extensively in the Caribbean. The climate there is really good for it. And it would be easy to think that sugarcane originated in the Caribbean, but it does not. It was brought there by European planters who then used Native American or African slaves to grow the sugarcane in the Caribbean. So at some point, probably within 20 years of Columbus's first voyage in 1492, at some point, there's this great moment in food history when chocolate and cocoa meet sugar, and somebody puts them together. That moment is not recorded by history. I wish I could have been there because that was obviously a brilliant combination that we all know and love today. But alas, that moment is lost in the mists of time. Vanilla also comes from the Americas and was often combined with chocolate. It's going to take a long time for a Dutch scientist to figure out how to make solid chocolate, like a chocolate bar or a piece of chocolate. He removes a lot of the fat from the cocoa powder and then figures out how to mix it back in a solid state. So you have what we think of as chocolate today. Also a brilliant invention, but probably not quite as awesome as chocolate meets sugar. One of the foods that comes from the Americas that definitely becomes hugely popular in Europe and is integrated into European food culture thoroughly is the potato. I have had people who say, no, potatoes are from Ireland. No, potatoes are from Russia. No, it's very well documented in the archaeology and the history. Potatoes come from the Andes. Potatoes are originally from the Americas, but they adapt so well to different climates. And the Incas had bred so many different types of potatoes, literally hundreds of different varieties, that as potatoes spread to different parts of the world, there was almost always a variety of potato that would grow beautifully in any climate, whether it was cold or wet or poor soil or whatever. Potatoes are a really useful crop because they don't require that much work. You can produce a lot of calories per acre. If an army happens to trample over your field, the potatoes are safe underground and are not destroyed the way a field of grain would be. And I do not recommend this. This is not medical advice, but you could live on potatoes. And if you get just 1 or 2 servings of dairy products a week to go with your potatoes, you could live on nothing but potatoes and not develop vitamin deficiencies. Again, do not try this at home. But this is what extremely poor Irishmen lived on for a long time. This is one reason the Irish potato famine was so devastating, because so many people in Ireland were so incredibly poor that they couldn't afford to eat anything but potatoes and maybe a little bit of dairy. Meat was a once or twice a year thing. They could not even afford bread. So when the potato crop failed, there were no other options. But the Irish potato famine is definitely a topic on its own for another day. So potatoes spread all over Europe. It takes a while for them to be accepted, but when they're accepted, they're thoroughly integrated into the food culture. Can you imagine French food without potatoes today? Or Russia with no potatoes? Vodka comes from potatoes. Now, I'm sure they would have found a way to make alcohol out of something else if they didn't have potatoes, but potatoes are a big part of European food and culture. And it's hard to imagine cuisines without them. So corn, beans, and squash are the 3 central foods in North American Indian culture, the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, topic of another video that I've already made. But beans come from the Americas. They did have green beans, that type of beans, and fava beans in the old world. But all the other beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, black beans, great northern beans, black-eyed peas, all that stuff, those are from the Americas, and those all were unknown in Europe before contact with the Americas. Squash, true squashes are from the Americas. There are squash-like things in Europe and the Middle East, things like watermelon or calabash, but those are not actually squashes. So all the different types of squash, like zucchini and yellow squash and pumpkins, those are all from the Americas. I don't think any of these other foods had as huge a dietary and economic impact as corn and potatoes. Those are the biggest things. And another thing that was very valuable that maybe we take for granted today that comes from the Americas are all the chili peppers. Bell peppers, jalapenos, habaneros, all of the different types of chili peppers come from the Americas. Think about how thoroughly and completely Hungarian cuisine absorbs paprika. Paprika is a type of chili pepper, but when it's grown in Hungary, in that climate and soil, it has a unique taste, and it is integrated into their cuisine so extensively that today it's hard to imagine Hungarian food without paprika. And with chili peppers, all different types of peppers, they grow really differently in different climates and soils, so they have a very different taste. If you're a gardener and you have planted seeds from another location and they ended up tasting completely differently than you expected them to taste, that is one reason why. Can you imagine Szechuan cuisine from China without chili peppers? Now they had Szechuan peppers, which they're not related to chili peppers. They give you a really tingly mouthfeel, but they don't exactly give you the same hot flavor. Black pepper, the type when we say salt and pepper, that kind of pepper, that was from the Spice Islands. And so that was known in Europe and Asia before contact with the Americas. It's burn, like when you bite into a whole peppercorn, that burn, that feeling of heat and tingle in your mouth is why Europeans came to call chili peppers peppers as well, because it reminded them most of black pepper. But they're totally botanically unrelated. They're completely different. And all of the peppers, whether bell peppers or spicy peppers, they're all from the Americas. And this is a very valuable crop. Remember, one of the things that Columbus was looking for when he was trying to sail to Asia, when he tried to go west to get to the east, was spices. The spice trade was hugely profitable, and spices were a way of flaunting your wealth and sophistication. The Europeans had, it seemed like, an endless taste for spices. So finding chili peppers, even though they were previously an unknown spice, this was an economically significant discovery. Now, some of the less salubrious, less healthy things that pass between North and South America are germs. They definitely go both ways. And technologies, inventions. In fact, there is a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. It's by Jared Diamond. He's not a historian, he's a biologist. And not all of his assertions are completely accepted by historians. But his book is kind of trying to answer the question, how come it seems like the Europeans always win? And he talks a lot about the type of germs from different parts of the world and how germs favored the Europeans. But that is a topic for another day. And I want to make the point again that the exchange is not one way. Foods and other things go back and forth from Europe to the Americas. It's not a one-way trade. It's actually exchanging these things, and both places are changed. Europe is transformed by the wealth and the food of the Americas, and the Americas are completely transformed by European technology and conquest, and above all, European germs. So the Columbian Exchange is a complex topic with reverberations even today in what foods people eat, which parts of the world have the most money, and what we think of as food. You know, is corn food for people? Is corn food for animals? Are potatoes considered healthy or unhealthy? Oh, by the way, side note, yams. Yams and sweet potatoes are not the same thing. Apparently, the people who can foods in the United States do not understand that. Yams are huge, oddly shaped, starchy plants, probably originally from Southeast Asia, spread all throughout Africa. Sweet potatoes are a type of potato. White potatoes, russets, Yukon Golds, those kind of potatoes, those are white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are related to white potatoes. They also come from the Andes. They are a variety of potato. They are not the same thing. The name confusion probably comes from in the southern United States, people from Africa who were familiar with yams back home, people who had been enslaved, forcibly brought to the Americas, they see sweet potatoes and it reminds them of yams back home. So they use the same word for them, even though they're different. Not the same thing. Yams are not sweet potatoes. I don't know why this is confusing to Americans, but they're not the same thing. Sweet potatoes are from the Americas. Yams are from the old world. Not the same food at all, not even related to each other. What you buy in the grocery store is almost always sweet potatoes, even if the sign or the label says yams. Okay, end of Food Historian's Rant. Thank you for listening. More videos about the Columbian Exchange and the germs and the technologies coming in the future. Thank you for listening.